Sam, thank you, and delighted to be here. So I'm going to just share a screen, I'm a mental health campaigner, and I'm passionate about trying to inspire the creation of mentally healthier workplaces and societies. So I'm going to talk you through my journey, my mission, and pose that question: is this one of the great leaderships of our time? Is mental health one of the great leadership opportunities of our time? So first, a statistic for you: 40%. So Qualtrics surveyed about 3,000 people globally at the start of the pandemic in March and April, and 40% of people said their company had not asked them how they are doing, which I find shocking. I hope that number has come down. I've got a poll out on LinkedIn where we've had about 100 people respond. 34% of people think that their workplace leaders are not leading well on the mental health agenda. So again, what's going on there? And I had the pleasure of talking to John Flint, the previous group CEO of HSBC recently. And John said, if you haven't embraced the health and well-being agenda by now, then you have to truly question as to whether you are a leader. And John is a visionary leader on this agenda, bringing the mission of creating the healthiest human system in financial services to HSBC in his first few months of tenure as group CEO. So we're not checking in with our employees as well as we could, and we need to embrace this as leaders, and I see this as a big opportunity. But let's start with a question. And this is a question that we're asked 10, 20 times a day normally on a personal level. And we very rarely answer this question honestly. And I'm going to ask that question to you, and it's, how are you? And we often say, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm all right, and we walk on. It's kind of a ritual. We sort of ignore this, and it's a greeting. So what I'm going to try and do is help you answer this question honestly and authentically. And I'll do so by sharing how I am today. And you can see behind me, I'm a 7 out of 10. And there it is on the screen. So I manage my mental health, my form, with a score out of 10. And this is a tool that has been given to me by a therapist many years ago. And these are the questions that I ask. So how motivated am I? I feel pretty motivated right now. What are my perceived energy levels? They're pretty good. Tasks and decisions feel pretty straightforward to me right now. I've slept pretty well. My exercise has been okay. I'd say it's probably not frequent enough to give me that percentage point that would get me up to an 8 out of 10. My diet is in good balance. I'm eating nutritious food. I have this real strong sense of purpose. That's always high for me. And I feel very connected to friends and family, although I need to be better at putting my children to bed without a fight. And so that's been playing on my mind a little bit today after a pantomime, as I would describe it, last night. And then how well am I balancing stress with moments of recovery, and how worried or relaxed about finances am I? I'm feeling, okay about my finances, but I know this is a big stressor for many. So what I'd invite you to do is just think of those questions, reflect on them, and think about where you might be today. And then we'll have a look at the scale. So that's the scale that I use. I'm as I say, 7 out of 10, which is good form. I'm just going to pull up the chat as well so I can see what you guys are reflecting on. So just think where you might exist on that scale, and you don't need to put too much effort into it. Just see what comes to you naturally. Just invite yourself to notice, and then let's ask the question: how are you today? So what I'm going to do to answer this is just stop sharing this screen for a second and share a different one. So bear with me as I navigate the technology. Should be getting quite good at this now. I tend to do it a few times a week. So there we go. We can see another screen now, hopefully, which is the polling screen. So what I'd invite you to do is just scan that QR code, which means open up your camera icon on your phone and hold it over that QR code, and you should see a scale come up. And what that scale will do will give you the opportunity to just select your score. This is totally anonymous. And what I'm going to do as well is put a different link in the chat in case you're struggling with that QR code. There we go. I can see one of the scores start to populate. Someone's put an 8 in, which is great. Some 6s, some 7s. That link that I've just posted will enable you to do it from a computer as well. So we're seeing some 9s, some 6s, some 7s. We're averaging, that's 7.2. So good form. So what I find, this is a really, really simple way of answering that question, how are you today? And I've seen someone post a 5 out of 10 there, and thank you for doing so. And, if we're experiencing low form, which is a 5, I think it's okay to accept that and know that all form is temporary. Just notice what is driving that and what might you want to do to try and drive it up a little bit. It's natural for us all to circle through our forms and cycle through them really quickly, given everything that's going on in the world right now. So please do just reflect on that. But again, nothing to worry about. Put the summary up there. We can see most of us are falling into that 7 category. So we're on good form, which is great to know. So what I'm going to do now is just navigate back to the screen, bear with me, to just change screens, and it's just taking me a little while to do that. Hold on, it's back to Zoom. That's annoying. Sorry about this. Total tech failure. Bear with me. I'm just going to go back to the meeting. It's just not letting me reshare my presentation. So I'm just bear with me a second while I work. All good,
Rob. Just take your time.
Yeah, work that out. Normally there's a little screen share icon at the top, isn't there, that comes up, but it doesn't seem to be there.
Are you on a Mac or a?
I am on a Mac, yeah.
So Command Tab.
Yeah, bear with me. Sorry, everyone. So what I'm going to, I think the problem is, I'm just going to come out of my presentation for a second, and then that will allow me to come back into, so yeah, I'm seeing my form drop now. So I was a 7, I'm probably about a 6 right now. So back to meeting. Where is my Zoom gone? Okay.
There you go, you're back.
Yeah, I've had to just quit that. So bear with me, I do apologize. That's that wouldn't normally happen. So I'm going to go back to my presentation, which I will need to reshare again. Right, and then I'm just going to go back into presentation mode. So right, we're back on track. So apologies, everyone. So thank you for sharing your scores and doing that. It's a great little tool that you can do within your teams. I've seen it done in family units well. We're building that into a mobile app that allows people to connect. So my mission now for the rest of the presentation is to watch my score go up from a 6 back to a 7, or even maybe an 8. So is mental health one of the great opportunities, but also challenges of our time? I'm pretty sure it is. It was before COVID. It definitely is now, in my opinion. But first of all, a little bit about me and my story. So I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a cyclist. And I do know what you're thinking. I absolutely do shave my legs. And one of the great things for our mental form, gentlemen, is freshly shaved legs and new bed sheets. And if you haven't tried it, I certainly advise that you do. And I know the ladies and maybe 1 or 2 of the gents will know what I'm talking about there. So very good for my form, that. I'm a friend. I'm a son. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a teammate. I am a social entrepreneur. I'm a DJ. I am successful. And like all of us, there are many little I's that make up the big I. There is no one thing that defines us. And I will, if we're short for a question later, explain the high heels and the lycra in the main photograph there. And I'm bipolar. I experience bipolar disorder, which is a mental illness. And it is a mental illness that is characterized by extremes of mood. From at its worst, deep, dark depression, where I cannot get out of bed. I cannot do my job, and I cannot look after my children. Through to periods of mania where I can take risks, make bad financial decisions, believe that I'm always right. But hopefully you noticed I used the words experience rather than suffer. At times I do suffer, and I wish I was anywhere but experiencing that depression that keeps me in bed. But I also experience so many beautiful traits of drive, of creativity, of an ability to challenge the status quo. And we don't often talk about the strengths of our mental health differences. And I think it's important to bear that in mind. But if I had a bit more time, I could tell you some stories about what it's like to live and work with this condition. I could tell you on the night of my 30th birthday, round a big circular table in a Moroccan restaurant, when it was time to bring the cake out, the lights dimmed, the music stopped, the drums started up, and this cake was brought out through the restaurant in a procession of singing and dancing and sparklers with the staff. And it was presented to the head of the table, to quite a handsome chap, actually. But that wasn't me. That was my best friend, Smithy. Because on that night, I was alone in somebody else's flat because I couldn't face being out. I couldn't face being out for my 30th birthday. And I could look back through my 20s to the signs of either thinking I was completely antisocial on one hand, or the complete life and soul of the party, center of attention, taking my clothes off in public and everything in between. And I was a high achiever. I thought I was different, and I was, but I didn't know I had a mental illness. And soon after that night on my 30th birthday, I couldn't face the workplace, and I took 3 weeks where I didn't go into work. And my boss, a wonderful lady at the time, had researched some numbers for some local therapists and suggested and invited me to go and call them and see my doctor. And I did that, and I was diagnosed with depression, which later became a bipolar diagnosis. And I thought, great, I can be fixed, I can be mended, I can be made well. And for a while I was. And then the depression came back with a loss of hope and a sense of futility. And look, my story got a bit dark then. When I was 31, on a very low point, I tried to end my life. And from that low point, I learned to manage my condition. I learned that exercise is crucially important, hence the cycling and the shaved legs. I learned with the love of close connections around me, I could thrive and cope through this. I learned that sleep is really important. I take medication. I've seen various different sorts of therapists, and I do so proudly. But I did so under the radar for many years because of stigma, because of a fear of how I'd be perceived by staff, by clients, by friends. And stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace associated by a particular circumstance, quality, or person. And are we really saying it's disgraceful to talk about mental illness, to have a mental illness? That we must smash. And my light bulb moment came in 2017 when I heard a good friend of mine now, a guy called Jeff McDonald, tell his story of anxiety and depression and the loss of his friend to suicide. And I sat there in the audience feeling shame. And I felt shame because there I am, a successful business owner with supportive people around that I love and respect. And every week when I'd go and see my therapist, I put the word physio in my diary. Physio, 4 years. My team must have thought I have the worst physiotherapist in the world that cannot fix this back injury. And I decided then to kind of come out and share my story, which I did in a pretty awkward Facebook post. But the response to that post changed my life. And it was people, sure, showing me love and concern, but it was people sharing and confiding in me that they experienced something too. Loved ones, partners, business contacts, friends, people just saying I experience mental ill health too, because I gave them permission to do so. So I thought, I'm going to do something about this. And I was motivated to go on this journey to make change. So I developed Inside Out, which is a social enterprise. And I did a lot of listening at the time and spoke to a number of thought leaders and anyone that would talk to me really. And I kept hearing the same message. We do not have enough senior leaders from our workplace who are open about their challenges of mental ill health. So I founded Inside Out, the social enterprise, I persuaded some eminent people to lend credibility. Lord Dennis Stephenson, who's co-author of the Stephenson Farmer Review of Mental Health in the Workplace, commissioned by Theresa May when she was Prime Minister. Ian Cheshire, who is chair of Heads Together, as well as Barclays UK and a number of other senior roles. Sue Baker, who leads the charity Time to Change, and a bunch of others. They backed me as an advisory board, a selection panel. And I went on this mission of finding role models, leaders from our workplaces who are open about the fact that they have a mental health challenge. We have the Chief Learning Officer from Unilever. We have the Commissioner from the London Fire Brigade. We have partners from law firms, from accounting firms. We have the Chief Risk Officer from Tesco. All of these amazing trailblazing people, 42 of them, who put their name to a list that we published in the Sunday Times in 2019. And then I'm pleased to say, from a standing start, we grew that list to 69 people with lived experience of mental ill health. Again, MPs, Charles Walker MP, again, CEOs, managing directors, lots of different diverse backgrounds and employers who are saying it's okay to talk about your mental health. But why are senior leaders so important as role models? Because anyone who speaks out on the mental health agenda and shares their story is a role model. But our senior leaders are so important because they can help facilitate culture change, and they can do so much more quickly. So I'd like to share a case study, and I've got a couple more we can talk about in the comments if we need to. But the chap in the trainers is a guy called Mark Twigg. And Mark shared his story of clinical depression to his workplace about three years ago. Immediately, 7 or 8 people put their hands up and said, I'm struggling too. A number of those got adjustments to the role, all of them got help, and a number of them have stayed with the business where they might ordinarily have moved on. But then the narrative moved away from mental illness to positive mental health and well-being. And they introduced an initiative called Take 2, which is 2 hours in the working week that anyone can do anything to prioritize their well-being or mental health, wherever you are on that mental health continuum, not just if you're ill, anyone. Now, the narrative is then moving to everybody in the workplace. And guess what? Really well received, productivity went up. But it gets better. The other chap is a guy called Rob Agnew, who used to work there. He's moved on recently. But he'd heard about the reputation of the firm before joining on mental health and felt comfortable being open about the fact that he experiences bipolar disorder through the interview process. That enabled him to be himself. It enabled Mark, on hiring him, to understand, okay, let's work out how to manage Rob effectively, and even had a conversation with his therapist. On joining the firm, Rob didn't have a single manic episode, which is the big part of his challenge, for 2 years. In fact, his entire tenure with the firm. And he puts that down to the fact he can be open, and the burden of pretending he's someone he isn't can be lifted. But also he's got Mark looking out for him and his triggers. And Gail, I agree, it's revelatory, revolutionary, and all of those things. But even better than this is that Mark himself had less episodes of his depression because got Rob looking out for him. So this isn't a hierarchical thing. This is a human thing. This is people looking out for each other in the workplace. And I've got many stories like this that are beautiful. And so senior leaders sharing their stories facilitate cultures that change to this. There's another reason why it's quite important. That's because our future King of England says so. This was the Duke of Cambridge on the Davos stage. I'd love to see more CEOs and those in positions of leadership come out and share their story. But let's talk for a second why we need to do this. And talk some narratives. This was an image I took from Google Images a few years ago now, but I Googled mental health. I did not Google mental illness. I did not Google grief or anguish. I certainly did not Google black and white photo of lady with head in hands. And this is the image we get when we think of mental health. Now, if we Google physical health, we get aspirational images of people being healthy, being fit, being vibrant. Where are our aspirational images for mental health? So we've got a brand issue for mental health, and we need to change it. We need to smash the stigma, and we need to rebrand mental health, which is why I'm talking about form score, the number out of 10, the vibrant colors you see here in my presentation. a little bit more context for you. I'm not going to labor on stats, but 1 in 4 of us will experience mental ill health. 15% are experiencing anxiety right now. That number will be higher. Suicide, we lose a life to suicide every 40 seconds. And it is going to be one of the biggest costs to employers. US dollars of 2.5 trillion next year. UK costs are 45 billion to employers. And these numbers are going up due to the coronavirus. So yeah, I love that challenge, Mark. Let's rebrand mental health. So we're as a result of coronavirus, we're more susceptible to a mental health challenge. But look, throw these stats away. Here's the important one. 1 in 1 of us have mental health. It's all of us. And if we accept that, we can accept we're all on a continuum. And our mental health oscillates up and down from struggling through to thriving. And we're not fixed. It's not black or white. We're not well or ill. One day we might be struggling. One day we might be thriving. I was a 6 out of 10 when I dropped because I couldn't get my tech to work. I'm a 7 out of 10 because I'm engaging with you on the comments and I'm really enjoying what I'm speaking about. Our mental health can move even within the hour. And some research has been done as to where we exist on this continuum. The message here is 65% of us, probably more now, are in that middle zone, and we might think we're okay, but actually by investing in our mental health and well-being, we can become more productive. And Deloitte did some analysis here of where people exist and the costs to UK employers. As I mentioned, it's a 45 billion cost or opportunity, if you want to see it that way, which I choose to do. The biggest cost is that of presenteeism. So that is people in the workplace who are turning up every day, but underperforming because of suboptimal mental health. That number will be bigger now because we're in a different workplace and a different way of working. So we need to focus on the mental health and well-being of our employees. If we do so, we can realize that opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about that briefly. So how can we treat mental health and well-being as a strategic priority? Gail, I agree, investment in people, it's key to it. But how do we invest in our people on the mental health and well-being strategy? And an integrated strategy looks like this, in my opinion. We've got awareness. We've got people like me doing talks like this saying, it's okay to talk about your mental ill health, okay? It's okay to say I'm struggling and I need some help, like we would with our physical health, like we need to because of how COVID is impacting us. But if we're getting people to be open and have role models and champions, then we need to support those people who do put their hand up and say I'm struggling. So we need support. We need resources like EAP schemes, employee assistance programs, mental health in-house counsellors. We need peer support networks. We need champions internally, mental health first aid. We need benefits on the prevention side as well. And this is where it gets interesting because like the example with Mark Twigg, if we can invest in people to stop them getting ill or to move more towards that thriving end, and this is an investment of time and resource and priority of leadership time, which is important right now, then we can actually really boost everyone and have a more productive workforce. But we need to do this because people are struggling more with their mental health and anxiety and isolation and general levels of uncertainty. So it's a necessity, but it's also a big opportunity. So I'll spend a little bit of time on talking about what might drive our form, but not too much because I know I've only got sort of 5 minutes, but I want some time for you guys to get into the Q&A. So financial well-being, really important driver right now. Are we? Thank you, Sam. I think I'm on track even with my tech faffing around, so that's really helpful. So are we prioritizing our finances? Are we getting into them if we're struggling? How are we talking to our employers if we are struggling? Are we enabling our employees to do that? Nutrition is a big driver of our mental well-being. Are we eating a balanced, nutritious diet? Are we looking at how we use alcohol? Alcohol is a stimulant and a depressant, and it kills recovery if we have that quite late at night. So I'm not saying don't drink alcohol. I'm saying think about how you're using it. Sleep, one of the biggest gains of our mental health performance. Really easy to prioritize an extra 30 minutes sleep, turn our tech off a little bit before bedtime, have good sleep hygiene. Exercise, great boost for our mental health. And you know, it's good for our physical health, but also our mental health. And I'm rushing through this. I would normally spend a bit more time on it. Social connections, we need to find ways to connect socially whilst we are physically distant. I hate the word social distancing. It should be physical distance and socially connected. I'd rather call and I lobbied to change that really. I think sleep definitely will affect your form, James, and it's a big one for me too. Stress management. Are we balancing our days with moments of recovery? Are we setting an alarm to get up every 50 minutes to stretch, to get away from the screen, away from the desk? Are we pursuing our hobbies, yoga, whatever it might be? Are we getting some fresh air? Balancing stress with recovery. Helping others, big driver of our own well-being. It's kind of a triple ripple effect. We feel good, they feel good, and then there's a societal effect as well. So there's 3 positive effects of helping others. And then yeah, the social distancing one, I always get drawn back into the comments. Defected Records, and I'm a bit of a DJ, I saw them saying, you know, social dancing, which is a much better one if we're going to use the word social, but I prefer physical distancing, social connectivity. And then sense of purpose. Some of us will have our sense of purpose eroded by the fact that we are not in the workplace, or we're working in different ways, or we're not seeing our colleagues. So can we find that in other ways, from our hobbies, from what we're doing and how we're doing it? So those are the pillars, the drivers of our form or our mental health as I see them and as I talk about them. So we're going to wrap up in a little bit, but I'm going to just spend a moment challenging you to a call to action. So leadership starts with yourself. It really does. So can you make a personal investment in your own well-being? Can you put your own oxygen mask on first, if you want to think about it in those terms? Because if we do that, we can support those around us, be it family members, be it teammates, be it people we are leading. As an organization and a leadership function, can we make mental health and well-being a strategic priority of our business, alongside accounting for cash, alongside doing business, alongside how are we going to trade out of the pandemic? Because people will remember how you made them feel, and we need them to work pretty hard right now. Everybody's working pretty hard, so we need to make their well-being a strategic priority. So my call to you is, can we do that? How are you today? Ask the question, mean it, be prepared to have the answer. Use the score. It's a really easy way of helping people articulate how they're feeling, but ask the question. And the use of the word today rather than how are you changes the emphasis, because it's more immediate. How are you right now? And then role modeling. Can we role model healthy behaviors? And for me, this is around, yes, if we do have a struggling day with our mental health, let's talk about it, but it's as simple as sharing a bit of vulnerability. But you know, showing that we are taking breaks, that we are exercising, that we are turning off our tech, that we are taking holidays, and that will set a good example for people we lead. So I'm going to finish in my last minute with something my daughter Gabby drew for me, and when I started being open about the fact that I have a mental health challenge publicly, I realized I needed to be open with my children. So I asked Gabby, how do we look after our mental health? And so she drew that at the top, and then you'll see, if you look carefully on the slide, there's a little L above the N. And Gabby's more concerned about the health of our lentils, our lentil health. And so I said, okay, Gabby, how do we look after our lentil health? And she said, that's easy, Daddy, no accidents. Wear your helmet on your bike, look after your head, which was a great literal answer from a 6-year-old at the time. And so I said, okay, what about our brain then? How do we look after our brain? And she said, think a lot. And I thought, yeah, okay, good answer again, very literal. I think too much sometimes. She drew a little healthy brain at the bottom. But yeah, my brain looks nothing like that. So then I said, look, Gabby, I needed to ask her a specific question. So I said, Gabby, if you woke up one day, you didn't want to play, you didn't want to get out of bed, you weren't feeling yourself, you felt sad, you didn't know why, what would you do? And Gabby looked at me like I was asking the most obvious question in the world. She said, Daddy, I would find someone who I love and I would tell them. I would talk. Find someone who you love and tell them, talk. And so then I said to Gabby, look, if you went to school one day, this was in the days where schools existed for 6-year-olds and 9-year-olds, would you, and you saw someone sit in the playground, a bit reserved, not playing like they would normally do, looking very sad, what would you do? And this time Gabby looked at me like I was a complete and utter idiot. She said, Daddy, I would go over and I would see if they're okay. I would ask if they're okay. Because we overcomplicate a lot of things as adults and in society, from a 6-year-old to things. If we're struggling with our own mental health, find someone who you love, or maybe someone who you don't love, and talk, because talking is the start of the process to recovery. Okay. But more importantly, with our colleagues, and it's harder to do this now, which is why the form score is a great tool. But if you sense that a colleague is struggling, and asking them, how are you today? Actually just check in with them, because we can see changes of behavior. And I can tell you this, at my worst points of depression, I didn't always want to talk, but it was super helpful to know that there were people available to listen. So thank you for listening to me. There's my LinkedIn profile if you get to LinkedIn with me. Sorry for the technical hitches, but really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. And Sam, how are you doing? You're on mute. Sam, you're on mute, I think. There we go.
I was thanking you.
You're very welcome. My absolute pleasure.
We've all had technical hitches today. It's been a steep learning curve. We did lots of rehearsal and so on, but you know, on the day
Yeah, no, I do apologise. I'm slightly annoyed at myself, but I'm definitely, my score is back up to an 8 actually. I've gone beyond the 7, so I'm feeling pretty uplifted right now.
And it's interesting, the score, because I did take the score, and it surprised me because I sort of posted in and I thought, okay, before I stepped into it, I thought, I'm feeling maybe about an 8, and actually came back and it said I think it was a 7, which surprised me because I was like, oh, maybe less than I thought. But I think the questions that you ask are really pertinent. Because it's not just about me, it's about how much touch point I have with the world around me and the people in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think what I've noticed from doing these sort of polls is that people are cycling much more quickly than before because of the challenges. So giving ourselves the gift of a minute to reflect and notice what we are. We often don't need to do anything about that, but it's such a powerful gift of a minute at the start of the day.
Mm. And your phrase is really lovely, actually. I think you said, invite yourself to notice.
Yeah.
Because we don't really, we rush out of the day. I know I do. I jump out and, you know, the days go. But it is important to notice. And the more we notice, the more attuned, and I'm sure you felt this, the more attuned and quicker you pick up on what you're feeling, what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think that's right. And yeah, self-awareness with mental health, it's a gift. And people like me who've had a challenge generally have built up that self-awareness because we've had to survive. So we know it drives our mental health. But a lot of us haven't done that. If we've had generally quite good, moderate mental health, we've never had to work out what's driving that. And for some, you know, for me, it's really, really individual. So for me, it's exercise, social connection, sleep, and now a sense of purpose. But for others, it could be managing stress better. It could be financial security and wellness, you know. So there's lots of different factors, but building up that self-awareness is a real gift to ourselves.
It sure is. So let me, I have questions. There's a question that came in from Catalina, and she says, the last few months have had a significant impact on our mental and social well-being. The good news is that we've seen in many organizations a process of destigmatization of mental health issues. And she says, albeit in many cases in a pretty superficial way. The bad news is that a lot of leaders are keen to go back to normal. All we've gained in understanding and willingness to help might be lost. How do leaders ensure that mental health stays high on the agenda of organizations? And the second part is take concrete actions to improve the well-being of their teams.
Well, it's a really good question, and I think, you know, the way organisations come through this challenge will be driven by the strength of their leadership and how they face up to it. And there's a number of aspects to that. But I think leaders that ignore the mental health and well-being as we come out of this of employees will struggle, because that, you know, that quote of that people will remember how you made them feel is really important on this one, because actually, you know, with that our world's rocked, and we're adapting to that. We've survived on adrenaline to do that, to adjust. And you know, we've got the frustrations and the different challenges of how COVID is impacting our mental health, which is varied depending on your personal circumstance. And then we're going to go back into the workplace in some physical way at some point and feel psychologically unsafe for a while. So organizations that do not address this will lose the trust of their employees. I think it's really fundamental. And I don't mind saying who it is. I was on an all-hands call with PwC in the Middle East relatively soon into the crisis. I was alongside the CEO, the Chief People Officer, and I got as much airtime as either of them to about 6,000 people. And it's choosing to prioritize it. And I think organizations that don't do it will lose out. But I think employees will demand it, because employees have had to give a lot in, whether it's being furloughed, whether it's adapting to working at home on an ironing board with, you know, that's their only desk, working with 4 hands to a room, whatever it might be at different levels, they've given a lot. And they will demand it of their employees. So I'm an optimist. I think this will help us on the mental health agenda, and I think we'll see some longevity of it, because I believe it will enable us to create a more human world.
Mm. Oh, and you know, it's potentially it's up to us to keep the pressure on our employers to address these issues and deal with them, and not let them fall off the radar. Some other questions. We actually have a gentleman who's in an ICU bed at the moment, chatting to us, and his comments briefly: balance is always the key. Stigma breaking requires huge courage and self-confidence. Isolation drives me stir crazy. Even having family isn't the same as physically meeting colleagues in work. Actually, that reminds me of a comment that Margaret Heffernan, our keynote speaker, said in an interview. Was, you know, one of her clients had said she was even missing the employee or the colleagues that she doesn't like, just that social contact, right?
Yeah.
So whatever it is, that dynamic's missing, right? There's a question from Adrian. I think it's really important to talk openly about how people are feeling, to normalize it, create an open, trusting culture. I used to get people to score how well they were feeling 1 to 10 in a team meeting. If anyone was 5 or below, I'd check in outside of the meeting rather than force them to speak inside the meeting. So that's another great way to keep it on the agenda. His question: however, occasionally I worried it wasn't right to ask everyone in the meeting. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think, you know, with this, I use the word invite again. I invite people to share their scores if they feel comfortable. So the poll that we did today is an anonymous poll, but I think in team meetings we can't put pressure on people to say how they're feeling if they're uncomfortable doing so. So most cultures that have adopted it, I think, adopt to it gradually, and people become more open. But actually, look, we're not asking people to disclose whether they've got schizophrenia or some of the more heavily stigmatized bipolar disorder conditions. We're asking people to say, how are you feeling about your well-being today? And the use of the number there, I think, is helpful in diminishing the fear of talking about it. But I think, you know, how we instigate it, so the leader sharing first to create that safe space is important. You know, I always talk about my score and why I am what I am. But I think making it clear that it's okay if people don't want to share, or maybe you want to check in individually. So it's a really good point. We need to just ease people onto this journey, I think.
And I think I agree. I think trust is a big part of it. Adrian's just added that the team seemed to really like it. So well done, Adrian. I obviously established that trust.
Yeah.
Lots of other questions, so just want to make sure I don't miss. Great stuff, Rob. Do you think we simply have a better understanding of the 200 plus mental health conditions and so are more aware of how prevalent it is? Or do you think it's a case that societal issues are negatively affecting people's mental well-being, and so more and more of us are experiencing low form more often?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I think the answer is both. So we are not only understanding conditions better, but we are creating that process of destigmatizing, particularly in the UK. We're actually pretty good at this. So people are becoming more comfortable disclosing when they've got anxiety or depression or whatever it might be, than saying I've got a bad back, I'm not coming into work today. So once you start creating that culture, the numbers will go up. But I think even pre-pandemic, there are some structural things that are causing a rise in common mental health challenges like depression and anxiety, the interaction with social media, the culture of perfectionism, the loss of our community and support networks. We're all very disparate. And then layering on that, you've got the challenges that are specific to the pandemic of isolation, of loss of social connection, of general levels of anxiety and fear of the future. So I think we are being more open, which is great, but there are some structural things both pre and because of COVID that will be causing a rise in mental health challenges for sure.
And another question, do you have a comment to make on positive stress? I find that purpose is an issue for me, especially in this COVID world. And actually when stress is present, I feel much happier and more stable.
Yeah, so this, I can't remember the name of the curve, but there's been a lot of research on this, which is the kind of, I think it's unhelpfully named the arousal curve, where there's a level of stress that tips you over into unhelpful stress, but actually we need, so stress is a physiological stress, is flight or fight, it's adrenaline and cortisol getting the body to prepare to either run or fight for its life. We need that to do this, to present, to hit a deadline, to do our jobs. Where stress becomes chronic and not balanced with recovery, that's the problem. So I think how we term it is interesting. So we need the impetus and the motivation to perform, but actually we need to balance that with moments of recovery. So stress is required to do our job. Not recovering from stress is typically what people mean when they say they're too stressed, because they're overthinking it, they're ruminating. So for me, I need that to perform as well, but I need to balance that with riding my bike a bit, so we get back to balance. So, I think in that particular case, a bit of stress, a bit of motivation, a bit of impetus is required. That's okay, and that's we all need that to perform.
Yeah, and too long a time with our nervous system under strain is not good longer term health wise, right?
Yeah, correct. So it's the word mindfulness is overused, but it's taking those mindful moments in the day that could give us a break from that stress and allow our parasympathetic nervous system to go the other way and rest and digest and recover. Because when we run away from a saber-toothed tiger back when all this was developed, we would then rest and recover from it all. But we go from one stressful challenge to another. That's when it's the problem. So just set the example I gave, setting an alarm every 50 minutes of the hour to get up and get away from everything you're doing is really helpful, and you will be more productive.
And I think we can squeeze in one last. Someone's asking to learn more about the app. FormScore app.
Yeah, so I'll post a couple of things in the chat afterwards, but basically we're evolving that FormScore into an app that allows people to post their score, but also check in with others. So you'll see people in your network, and then you'll be able to support people whose scores are moving, but you would choose who's in that network. So it'll be called Form, and I'll put some links in the chat so you can kind of follow it, and we'll be in the App Store in July, which is really exciting.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rob. Brilliant. Any final comments before I've just got some announcements and notices?
Yeah, so for me, on this agenda, the mental health agenda is, as leaders of workplaces, don't be afraid to get into it, and don't be afraid to start, because even the most advanced companies out there on this are in the foothills of where we need to be. So is getting on the journey and starting, because your employees will value what you do. Thank you.